This is Rooted Cosmic Soul, sacrificing the patriarchy from a broom closet in the here and the there, offering rememberings in times of chaos and bullshit. In the last episode, I was talking about being kind in unkind times, and then I had a thought of like, okay, well, let's also talk about divine feminine rage. Because I think in these times, like divine feminine rage is righteous, and like when I say in these times, I mean like millennia, the past multiple millennia of this deeply seated hatred of women, of the feminine in the form of energy or physical body, whether cis or trans, even non-binary folks who don't have who don't lean into feminine cis, don't lean into a cis woman or trans woman, but by virtue of the fact that you're not leaning into masculine, you are a problem, according to the construct. And the ways in which the female body, psyche, connection to spirit, to earth, to each other has been targeted and silenced in atrocious, violent ways. Which brings me to this idea of divine feminine rage. I think that it sits in all of us, regardless of where one might sit on the spectrum of their gender identity. Because, again, as I mentioned, I think it was in the Being and Doing episode, when we're talking about yin and yang, we're talking about energies. And one of the first knowings or learnings that could be really important for folks new to this, to their awakening or their understanding of what's really happening in our reality, is to understand how patriarchy has manipulated knowledge around these energies. And in that manipulation, misconstrued it completely and hidden people's power to themselves. And I say that to say that these energies are in all of us. It doesn't matter how we identify. They are available to us to engage. And that being said, there is for those of us who do identify as cis or trans women, I believe there is a divine feminine rage that's sitting in us. And I bring it up now because I want us to rethink this idea of what that could look like. Now, I think it's along the lines of my very first episode when I talked about endurance in these times, and this idea that usually when one hears the word endurance, they're going to think I definitely went to physical endurance first and foremost. And I think with divine feminine rage, I don't do this anymore, but I was in this really beautiful conversation with some folks, and I offered this to them, and that's why I thought I'd offer this here, of this idea of when we think feminine rage or a woman's rage, or even when we think we haven't been allowed to access true rage, oftentimes we're thinking about it from a very masculine standpoint in terms of action outward, action on someone, and outward gaze. Rage, right? Rage, usually for many of us, we're thinking about rage in terms of its impact, something I'm doing that's going to impact my outer world. So it could be violence, it could be physical violence, emotional violence, psychological violence, but it's some sort of action outward. And I think that is definitely part of it. And I also want to remind those of us who are trying to bring in all of our pieces and remember and actualize our wholeness is that divine feminine rage can also entail a taking back, an internal processing. So I'm not going to be out there punching you in the face. I mean, unless you put your hands on me, I'm not putting my hands on you. But understand, I'm moving from some serious divine feminine rage. And that's what kind of is helping me hold fast to this idea of the inward gaze, to unpack the ways in which an out of balance, toxic, masculine gaze, energy, way of being, or rage, a masculine rage, has allowed me for multiple generations, my lineages, to forget, to not remember the wholeness of ourselves. And in that, I feel rage. And part of that is remembering, think of it this way. If you ever taken a leadership course, right, you do learn there's different types of leaders. There's leaders who are super fucking loud, and they're like directive, they're power over. And then there's the quiet leader. There's the person that makes moves, models a way of being, and has generated a respect that people will follow them, right? There's people who are I'm blanking on the word, but like God, why am I blanking on this word? The folks who play by nobody's rules, and they don't actually give a fuck if you're following them or not. But for some folks, that's really enticing, right? And folks will follow that energy because that energy is enticing, right? So there's different ways to experience this divine feminine rage, and I ask that we remember that rage can be exhibited, can be engaged, can be processed, and it does not have to mean harming ourselves or others. It could mean that for some folks. Again, I'm not judging. I'm not making a directive to move one way or the other. I just know in a violent society, that's where many of us are going to go. So that's covered. There's all kinds of books and stuff that you could engage and read on that. I want us to also hold this idea that the very act of going inward, the very idea that what you need, you don't have to buy on Amazon, that you can find inside yourself. The very idea that I could create bonds with other people and in that get some of my needs met. I don't necessarily have to depend on a industry of blah, ... right? That wants me to buy something that's likely not good for me anyway. That there's different ways to think about this and how I'm in relationship. That is part of expressing divine feminine rage. I know, that sounds, for some of us, that just is like, what? What? I gotta rewind that. What? Because even I just had to take a moment of like, I know it, but even hearing myself say it out loud, I had to let it drop in a little bit. Of like, remember, I'm constantly reminding myself to remember that some of the things that I've been led to believe, whether that's been given to me by parents, grandparents, ancestors 7 generations back, the media, teachers, politicians, whatever, a lot of those things are grounded, even if they were well-intentioned, they're grounded in toxic masculinity. They're grounded in white supremacy, patriarchy, misogyny, capitalism. And so it's really important for me to slow down and ask the questions. Like, I was taking a walk with a friend that I hold dear, and she was saying how, well, they say that the core of the human is to other, that's part of who we are. And I was like, well, who's they? Who's this they? She's like, well, you know them, they, people with knowledge. And I'm like, yeah, within a construct where we're meant to be disconnected and hating each other, I'm sure that's a thing they would say. But the construct is just that. It's a construct. White supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism are ideas that have become the foundation, but they don't have to be. Divine feminine rage is going to show itself in all the ways that we decide to say no to that. Whether I'm doing it from an aspect of being or an aspect of doing. This is Rooted Cosmic Soul, sacrificing the patriarchy from a broom closet. The energy here stays here. The energy there stays there. Sentia later. Return when moved to do so. Same Bruja time, same Bruja channel.